Oh, what you know about me? Oh, what you know about me? Let's go, y'all. You know what day it is. It's pod day. You said what happened?
You're out of control.
Oh, yeah. I gotta do my Snoop step. Every time I do my Snoop step, you know I'm ready to pod.
He's out of control already, ladies and gentlemen. Already.
You already know what we do. Episode 211. I'm your usual Jarrett, Chief Revenue Officer at Outside the Box Digital. And you know I got my brother, my brethren, your favorite CEO, Cuzzo, Chadeo. What's the word, baby?
We in the building, man. And I'm gonna feed off your energy, man, because it's pod day. You know what I'm saying? It's pod day. Okay. And it's finally beautiful outside on a consistent basis, so that sun is making me feel good. Because remember, I posted that video about a month ago. I had snow outside in fucking April. It was crazy. So it's a beautiful day. It's pod day, which makes it a double beautiful day. So we in the building. You know what it is, man. So ladies and gentlemen, you know how we like to start the show. G&T, grateful and thankful. This grateful and thankful goes out to my neighbors out here in my community, man. We had a long talk this weekend about where we came from and where we're going, right? We didn't realize that so many of us had actually made it out from where we were originally born and raised at. And we just talked about our journey to suburbia and what it looks like to be parents in our version versus what we were raised in, and the knowledge and the support system that comes along with that, man. And I just thought it was such a beautiful thing, man. So grateful and thankful to everybody out there, man, that is providing a support system for somebody that got out or trying to get out themselves, man. There is a better life. And, for the people that's supporting them and helping them out along the way, hey, thankful for you guys, man. G&T, man. We got to be a village all the way through. You heard?
Absolutely, man. I just want to say it. I'm a double of grateful and thankful, man. I'm just going to say to you, Cuzzo, you know what I'm saying? For everything that we've endured for the past 2 years. Shit, I was going to say 3 months, but 2 years. It's been back to back, especially these last 3 months, man. Like, so real talk, man, with us adding on a co-host, Nadege, just can't be here today. Love says, we're going to hold down the fort. But just want to say to y'all, man, I'm grateful for the team we have, man. I'm grateful for the love. I'm grateful for how we move. I'm grateful for everything that we do, bro. Like, and we're going out the can. We're going from the couch to the big stage, and we did it being us, bro. So, like, I'm just grateful, bro. I love you for free.
Love you for free, man. I wouldn't do it with any other person, and you know that to be a fact.
That's crazy.
I wouldn't do it with nobody else.
That's nobody else. As a fact, though, let's you know what it is, man. We got first time listeners more than a title. We go deeper than just the title. We want to know who you are, what you sacrificed to make it to where you are, how you shifted your mindset at your early age, right? We want to know all those things that give it back to the coach. And today we got a phenomenal guest. And before we give this brother the intro that he deserves, quick shout out to the Live Podcast Network. First woman-owned, black-owned podcast network. And if you want more content like More Than the Title, make sure you take out your phone, scan the QR code, download the app, subscribe, and half of your subscription on your purchase goes to the content creators of your choice. So it takes a lot to do this. I just said the grateful and thankful, y'all. We doing it for y'all. So make sure we support, and we don't just talk, we walk it. We support our own, and we rock with our own. What a time to be alive. You did?
What a time to be alive. And ladies and gentlemen, just so y'all know, I don't want to hear shit later. I didn't say phenomenal, but Cuzzo said phenomenal. He said phenomenal. He said phenomenal guest, because we always start the show off and let you know we got a phenomenal guest. I'm gonna give him a sneak peek. We had to stop Jeff in the green room because he was dropping fucking so many gems. So we got to slow down, Jeff. Slow down. We got to go. We got to get it on the live. So he was dropping so many gems. So Cuz already told you, phenomenal. And in the immortal words of one of the old DJs back in the day,
get your tape decks ready.
We'll take him back.
Because the brother gonna drop some gems on y'all, man. Here it's gonna be another fire episode. Facts.
So let's get to it, man. First of all, this brother is the CEO and founder of Reframe AI Technologies and Reframe Consulting Services, and also the host of the Change Podcast by Reframe. This brother isn't just a leader. He's an innovator, a trailblazer behind groundbreaking change operating system and inclusive experience design approach that's helping leaders drive sustainable growth at scale in the advertising, creative, and marketing space. A 2-time award-winning author, published by Wiley, and named one of the campaign's US 40 over 40. Before launching Reframe, he served as a partner and managing director at Ogilvy Mather in New York City, y'all. I don't know if y'all know the gratitude of what that is, but Ogilvy is the man who wrote the book on advertising, and he worked at that company and ran that company. So just to let you know who this brother is, he led the development of the industry's first cultural practices, redefining how marketing and communication connect with today's diverse audiences, right? And he's still doing it today through keynotes and thought leadership. You've seen him on New York Times.
Boom.
You've seen him on The Economist. You've seen him on Fast Company. You've seen him on NBC's Today Show, Fortune, and also his own The Change podcast. But he's on your favorite podcast for the very first time today. Let's introduce our brother, Mr. Jeffrey L. Bowman, y'all.
Yeah. Thank you, man. That's a phenomenal intro. How about that?
Welcome to the show. Welcome to the show.
Yes, let's do it.
Let's do it, man. So you know how we like to start, brother. Like, we usually like to start from the beginning. Let's start from the beginning. Tell us about some, growing up, some of your early influences, so we could kind of understand the mindset to where you ascended.
Yeah, no, thank you both for having me, and really excited about being on the pod. And given the the world of untruths, this is extremely special because we get to tell our own stories and our own narrative. And so I'm not going to take you all the way back, but I'm from South Carolina, Spartanburg, South Carolina. So Southerner, proud Southerner. After graduating from high school, went to South Carolina State University, which is an HBCU. And I like to, start there because a lot of folks think about, the end or, toward the back half of your career. Oftentimes you think, especially in the Northeast, that you have to start from a specific school. I like to let people know, not only did I go to the HBCU, but I went twice. And that was at Clark Atlanta, where I got my MBA. But prior to getting my MBA, I started, my career journey really started, on the back of a Pepsi truck. And I mean that, at South Carolina State, late 80s, early 90s, a lot of companies kind of using a similar playbook to the day, whenever they want diverse talent. And I tell anyone, if you really want to pursue an opportunity in corporate America, why not go to the places that they're looking for you? And that's usually at a and so Pepsi was looking for summer internships for juniors, actually. I was a freshman rising to be a sophomore. And so for me, if you know anything about the automotive industry, anything about South Carolina, we're the home of BMW in the US. And the reason for that is in the 80s, prior to BMW and some of the other companies coming, we were a manufacturing community. So my mother, my grandmother, parents, relatives, they all worked in manual labor. So they had first shift, second shift, third shift. And so, and it was textile driven. So my community was the first community impacted by NAFTA, North American Free Trade Agreement.
Free Trade Agreement, correct.
Right? Mm-hmm. So you bring it full circle. We're talking about the tariffs today. I was, early teens, and the entire economy within the upstate evaporated, mainly because of China. And so governor brought in an entire industry that historically was in the Midwest and recreated an economy. And so, if you think about my level of preparedness, really had to do with a lot of the macro events that were happening around me, saw people losing jobs, reinvigorated economy, by global NAFTA impacted. And so for me, going to college, HBCU, the idea was to get out of South Carolina.
Yeah, that's real.
Right? And so Pepsi came looking and, literally, and this gets to the level of preparedness. They were not looking for a freshman or sophomore. They were looking for juniors and seniors. And there was no internet at the time. And I hate to sound like the guy, I had to go to school when it was like 5 inches of snow, 5 feet of snow out there. But the reality is that, I was prepared. The Career Development Center, Mr. Robert Hemby at the time said, hey, if we need any fillers, be ready. I'll call you at 7 a.m. And so I got the call at 7 a.m., went down there, interviewed, first on the list. Basically was told that I was too young, come back in another year. But if anything opens up, we'll give you a call. And so I was back home that summer, got to call. It had to be the beginning of June. Went up to Knoxville, Tennessee, as a 19-year-old, interviewed, got the job, and that was the start of my career. And it was basically shadowing route salesmen for the summer to learn the operations of direct store delivery or a third-party distribution. Yeah.
Shit
That's
that
how
you
it
learned
started.
on that route, right? Like those are the ones that become the CEOs.
Yeah, here's what I say to you with regards to that. And I've heard you guys in other interviews. I mean, I really do believe starting from the ground up is the best way.
Absolutely.
And so
Yeah.
when you think about, me being 19 years old, had my own apartment, was at near the University of Tennessee, went in every day at 5 a.m. to help preload the trucks, count the inventory, understand, at the end of the day, had to count the inventory so it reconciled to the number of cases that were sold pre and post of the day. That's inventory management, right?
Right.
And so whatever business you're in, you got to understand what's going out the door so that
Right.
you can refill the truck or refill the inventory
Right.
at a certain price point. Again,
Yep.
these are lessons that you're learning from the ground up, but you really don't know, like, this is going to be career changing fundamentals that you're going to take when you do learn how to manage a balance sheet. You do how to learn how to manage a P&L. You've actually seen and counted the units that's being reported on that paper, right? And so it just takes you behind the numbers in a way that most people can't imagine. So yeah, that was a not only a career changing, life changing, because it got me out of manufacturing from a generational standpoint, right?
Yeah.
Wait, but before we go too far, though, Jeff,
let's go crazy. Yeah,
I know you didn't want to go too far back, but we have to talk about the fact that, first of all all your family in South Carolina?
Well, my mother and father. My father, he grew up basically in the military, Air
Okay.
Force.
Okay.
But my mother, my grandmother, she's no longer with us, rest in peace. But primarily my family's in South Carolina. Yeah.
Right. So now we have to talk about, yes, you went to a HBCU, you know what you wanted to do, you went and got your education, but then you uprooted yourself, right? So you don't have any family in Tennessee, am I correct?
Not at all. I mean, I've moved
Nashville,
about
right?
8 times, right?
Right, but let's talk about I'm just saying, but
That's
at 19 years old, okay, you got the call, and the call wasn't for the distribution center in your state, right? Or
No, not at
closer.
all.
You had to exactly. So that we have to talk about what goes through your head at that point. What kind of conversation do you have with your parents or your caregivers at that point to say, hey, I have a job opportunity, which they're gonna be like, oh yeah, Jeff, great.
Yeah.
But you're gonna be like, well, it's not in this state, it's in Nashville, right? And I'm thinking about going there. I don't know nobody and kind of like relocating my entire self. So can you walk us through like what that conversation was like?
I mean, that conversation started before I actually got the internship.
Okay.
And what do I mean by that? I'm a really sound old now, but I'm the only child, from my mother, and really early on, I was a self starter. And the reality is that economically, it was a tough area, right? And so for me, I was an athlete. And so, what happens when you're an athlete? You're exposed to other cultures, right? So you see the disparity in terms of economic.
Yeah.
And so for me, I saw kids wearing shorts that I wanted, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was told at an early age, if you want to pay $25 for shorts, you got to go out and get it. Like, it ain't coming from me. And so right out of, 9th, 10th grade, I was driving a school bus, plus job at Kenny Shoes on the weekends, plus Little Caesars Pizza. So in high school, I had 3 jobs.
Damn! Yo, where's how many jobs you got?
3 jobs, bro. No, and here's the reality. Like, I knew my circumstance.
You definitely from that.
I knew my
Little Caesars. I was riding what?
Yeah, no, real talk. In South Carolina, once you got your driver's license or conditional license, you could, and this is how I got to work at Pepsi, because I already had technically a CDL, right? I had the license to drive a commercial vehicle. And that commercial vehicle through high school was a school bus. So I drove my neighborhood to high school back and forth, then came back after driving the route home to practice track, which I went to South Carolina State on a pole vaulting scholarship. And then I would take the athletes home after practice. So I would get home about
What? Yo, I've never heard a story like that. We've heard a lot of stories, Jeff.
Hold on,
Real
hold
talk.
on. Slow down.
We've heard a lot of
Jeff,
stories.
slow down. I know in the South they let you get your license. Well, at like 16, is it like 16 down there?
15.
Okay,
15.
even
I
earlier,
lived
right?
there 15.
Right. Yeah, because I know when I got my conditional, if you took driver's ed, right? If you took driver's ed, you could get it at like 16. So you got it early. But here's the thing, Jeff. Let me just keep it 100 with you, right? If I had my driver's license and I'm an athlete, right? And you let me drive the school bus, and I got the whole team on the school bus. Jeff, I'm telling you right now. You remember the magic school bus that would have should be bouncing up? It would have been a whole different situation.
Right. No.
What are we talking about?
No, look, it was you don't know what you don't know at that time.
Right.
And so, for me, I was always that dude in terms of responsibility. And so, I'm not talking about everybody that went out got the opportunity to drive the school bus. It was selected. They had like 5 to 10 school out of maybe 50 routes, right, for that district. So I qualified, I seeded in terms of my peers, and then the opportunity was given. And, that was like $500-600 a month in high school, which is, not bad. You know what I mean?
No,
but what it gave me was the ability, I wouldn't say, obviously everybody economic mobility in terms of what they call it today, but what it meant is that I didn't have to ask my mom for anything, right? And so, when you ask about me making the move at 19, there was no question because I drove that process with her, right? Even from, you're an athlete, I pole vaulted, right? And so one of the reasons I do like to tell the story about me going to South Carolina State University, which is in the MEAC. Initially, I went and applied to Morehouse and Howard. Those are my top two. And my, my fallback was South Carolina State. Now, the reason I ended up at South Carolina State is because they had Prop 48. I didn't make high enough on the SAT to qualify for financial aid for summer school prior to going full time. And so, my work ethic was unreal because essentially I had to go to the night school in college to make up for the credits so I could be eligible for my sophomore year, in addition to, continue to practice, but not be able to play because I was Prop 48. And so, moving forward, that work ethic is, it's a through line. Like, you're not going to tell me no. And if I want something, I'm going to get it. And so, that happened.
Message. That's right.
And throughout high school, then when I got to South Carolina State, I had a battery on my back because, someone had told me no based on my inability to test. And now, I had the battery on my back. It's like, I'm going to blow all these cats out that did get the opportunity to go to their schools of choice. And I'm a rocket. And that's how I, went in with a vision in terms of what the outcome I wanted to be. I knew I didn't want to go. I knew I wanted to get out of South Carolina because everything that was happening economically because of NAFTA. So for me, getting an opportunity at Pepsi was my ticket, right?
Yep.
People talk about the draft is the ticket. My ticket was getting that internship. And that gave me exposure to, a different state. And you talk about at 19, I didn't know what a vol was, right? Everybody knows that's Tennessee Volunteers. Carl Pickens was my road dog. I didn't know Carl Pickens was because if you were not into SEC football, the minute I saw him on the front of a cover, I was like, that's my boy. He stays in the complex.
Right.
Paul Pickens was like the top receivers, freshman, sophomore year.
Yep.
So not only was I learning, working really hard, by the way, at Pepsi, I was kicking it with a UT athlete, and we had a ball that summer. Yeah.
There you go.
Message. I'm gonna tell you a story real quick. Jeff, I never told this story, but I'm gonna tell it just because you said this, right? And when you're an athlete, and Cuzzo was an athlete, when you're good at one sport or good at multiple sports, a lot of the other teams try to recruit you, right? So I was playing sports in high school, and we had the track team, and the pole vault coach tried to recruit me.
Okay.
This is a true story. I'm not even gonna lie, Cuzzo, right?
Never told. He never said nothing about pole vault.
Jeff, I never told the story, right? So I was like, pole vault. I'm like, okay, not too bad, right? So the first couple of they start the bar low. So right, I'm okay, no problem. When they raised that shit up to about 10 feet and gave me the long pole, and I was like, wait a minute. I was like, to describe it. I said pause. I said pause.
I hate it the way you said it.
I ain't gonna lie, right? They was teaching me how to bend it back and like snap forward, right?
Right.
I was.
Yeah.
He's not gonna let me tell the story. He's not gonna let me tell.
YouTube is gonna kill him. YouTube, I ain't gonna do it. YouTube is gonna kill him. Go ahead, continue.
So, we have the foam pit, the fall pit, right? And I was like, but that's in front of the fucking, because you got to run. I'm like, that's in front of the fucking ball. But what if this motherfucker go back the other way and my momentum don't count? And that was the end of my pole vaulting journey.
It's funny. No, you hit it on the nail.
Go back the other way, it's over. It's over.
That shit is difficult. It look easy. People think it's easy. That shit is difficult. You shitting me?
And it's all technique, but again, like when the smaller heights, it's fun. But I'm telling you, like when they actually start putting that bar up there, you gotta fucking and that was it. Look, grand opening, grand closing, Jeff. I walk
real
like,
tough. Real tough.
This will not happen. I will not be a pole vaulter. I said I will not, man. We lost. Oh, he's still there?
No, I'm here. I got somebody trying to deliver a package, but
okay.
No, you hit it on the nail. The first thing you got to do is learn how to.
You on mute, Cuzzo. You on mute.
I said, my bad. If I gave Cuzzo one, I gotta give you one for the delivering the package. I just didn't like it right after that one.
I told you he's out of control.
I love you. Yeah, my guys, we gotta do it. We gotta do it.
Talk to me.
Like, yeah, bro. But I'm curious. I gotta ask you,
Jeff. He was saying something. Go ahead, Jeff.
No. It's like that's the first thing you learn is how to fall, right? And having, I did it in high school, did it throughout college. Right now, I think, that's the symbolism as itself. Before you actually get up and over the bar, my highest was like 14.6 in high school, and then 16.8 in college.
That's great. What was the furthest fall you took? Was it 13, 14?
I'd say probably 12 feet. And you come down, you hit the ground, and I hit a bar. I hit the the support.
Nope.
You're a bad man too. You got the scholarship too. But what I did get from what you said, Jeff, and we'll get into the business and everything else. Like, you told us the mindset. And if people didn't pick up on it, let's give the cliff notes, right? Basically, you saw the family going through it. They're all in manual labor. You saying, yo, look, I don't want my family to be working this hard. They're working extremely hard. They're doing what they need to do, and they're proud of that. That's cool. But I've got to be the one that breaks the mold, right? Like that was the first thing.
Yeah, definitely. And we lived in a multi-generational household, right?
Absolutely.
So what that meant is I lived with my grandmother and my mother. Me and my mother, we basically had the same room through high school. And so it wasn't until college that, I actually got, the ability to have my own room. And I say that not, to talk about, the hardship, but more or less in terms of my driving motivation.
Right? There you go. That's it.
And everybody has something. They may not articulate it, whether it's directly or indirectly. But for me, you know, it wasn't about getting out of South Carolina per se. It was elevating from a generational standpoint. And, you know, I can remember early on my grandma, I used to say to her, hey, we're going to be rich, going to move you out of this house. And mainly because of my aspirations and the people that I was around, right? You know, people don't talk about this enough. When you're an athlete early, at least back in those days, now, you know, you take a look at athletics, you know, it's everything is a program, right? We went to the Little League elementary school, played Pop Warner, you know, football is huge down south. But, you know, you went out of your neighborhoods, right? And so what that meant is that, you know, I had exposure, you know, to white neighborhoods, right?
There you go.
And we got to play against those teams, and you saw like they had all the pads and the equipment and the elbows and everything. And so then when you get to middle school, you know, unlike a lot of the parts here in New York, you know, we went to the school that we were assigned to, obviously post integration, but you then saw those people that you played Pop Warner with in middle school.
Yeah.
And payback is hell, right? Now I get to pop your ass. And so, but you still are playing on the same team. But those become your friends, right? Those become your bros because you played together. I happen to befriend, you know, organically the high school principal's son, Ryan Delaney. Ryan Delaney, you know, when I got into high school, introduced me to all of his peers. Did not know like his dad was like the principal of the high school. That got me access and exposure to different things. I played the trumpet. I was either first or second chair. Sean Arbuckle. Sean Arbuckle's Jewish. I didn't know at the time because in the South you were black, white. That was it. You're Baptist, Southern Baptist. And so, you know, the diversity piece for me gave me access to dream about things that I didn't necessarily see day to day, right? And so once I got, you know, a couple setbacks with regards to Prop 48, you know, couldn't go to Howard or Morehouse because of, you know, Prop 48. Ended at South Carolina State. I thought, you know, for me, like I had a little bit of setback. I had to play catch up. When I got the opportunity at Pepsi, it was game on. Let's go.
Yeah, that's real, bro. And I want to touch on like my upbringing was similar to yours, Jeff. Right? Was an AAU basketball, so all of that. Was a star basketball player on the team, but I went to Catholic school all my life. So the people that I saw, right? I was in school with the Puerto Ricans, the Spanish, Asian, Middle Eastern, African, everybody you can think of, right? These are my classmates. So like what I learned from them, right? And my motivation, I'm gonna keep it real with you, just like you said with your parents, was mine. Mom is going to get her master's degree. She's trying to be assistant principal. She's going to Fordham University, right? Nobody to pick me up. My cousin has to pick me up. She's cooking while she's sitting there trying to graduate high school. My pops is working 2 jobs from 7 o'clock in the morning to 11 o'clock at night. Manual labor. He's working in the school as a school aide during the day. Then he's cleaning up the school after, once they leave. And I would see him come home at 11 o'clock at night, maybe drink a beer or two, talk to us for a second. If I'm up, probably not, you know what I'm saying? And then wake back. He's the first one up in the morning, waking us up. And then you look at that and be like, yo, damn, like I've got to be the one that does something. I've got to do something, right? Because this can't be it. So we always have a saying here, message in the movements. So if anybody into this, right, there's message in the movements. There's a lessons in everything that you're seeing. You got to take the positivity out of all of that stuff. You see your parents, you see your people, your loved ones working. Who's going to be the one to break the mold? And it's not that they're not able to break the mold, but you needed to see it. Somebody needed to see it. They took a step that was further than somebody else's step. You know what I mean?
Yeah, real talk.
Yeah, and before we go forward, for anybody that's wondering, because I know Jeff has said it a couple times, Prop 48 or Proposition 48, pretty much let me just explain to y'all what that is, right? Pretty much it's like a standardized system for athletes to be able to play college sports, right? It's based on your ACT or your SAT scores, because you can take the ACT also, and your GPA, which is your grade point average, right? Now, that's the minimum set of standards, and then you have the school standard for them to allow you to come in, which is like a double, right? So yes, you could actually, and if I'm not mistaken, Jeff, I think is it still 2.0? Is it still 2.0 for athletes or something like that?
I think the last time I remember was 2.5, and
2.5,
the other part.
Right?
The other part I'll say, for most of us, not only is it the scores, federal funding is tied.
Federal funding, right?
There
Right.
you go.
So ladies and gentlemen, right? This is why, when we're kids and stuff like that, and a lot of us urban kids can understand when your parents are pushing for you to get these good grades, it's not only because it helps you in that school, but what it does is it opens up your opportunities now for when you do apply for these colleges, because seats are limited and they're getting tens of thousands of applicants every year, right? For sports and arts and etc. This is how they pick through the people and say, yes, you are allowed to come to the school that you pick. This is why a lot of times college kids will apply to multiple schools, right? Because you might not get your first school, right? You might not get your second. And now you have to apply to multiple schools, to give yourself an opportunity to still get a college education, just in case you don't get your first pick due to, whatever circumstances of the selection process that stopped you, right? So that's right.
And there was no Common App.
Yeah. Right.
You had to fill out every school. So
every school, right?
Yeah.
And so Jeff, let's talk about let's fast forward. Like you're in Pepsi, you're working in summer, you got the UT team, How did we get to creative marketing, advertising? How did we get to that?
Oh man, that was many years later.
Okay, walk us through. Walk us to the moment that you got to it.
Yeah. So, and it all plays a little bit to, what I didn't get, right? When I ended up at Pepsi, Pepsi at that particular time, and even in my book, when you think about the integration of these companies, a lot of it happened in sales. So if you look at the history of advertising, brands wanted to get into African American neighborhoods at that particular time. So they had an ethnic-based sales force, African American sales force. So Coke and Pepsi, 40s and 50s, basically had the strongest programs in terms of how African Americans got into what we know today as brands, right? And so Pepsi had a similar program, and what you'll see even today, these programs will come and go, ebb and flow. And this is at the time Pepsi had acquired a lot of franchise-owned bottling organizations, and they were making them into corporate-owned, FOBO and COBO-owned bottling organizations. And so they needed talent, and specifically diverse talent for their pipeline. And so for a lot of folks who you may see at high positions today, over the last 30, 40 years, it usually came from one of those SIPE, summer internship programs. And so my program sent you to Pepsi South, which was the headquarters in Dallas, Texas. And here's the kicker. You're with all the other interns from, the Harvards, the Stanfords, and all these other schools. And then you had these group of people from HBCUs who were competing for the next slide, right? And then they sent you to Purchase to get your exposure in terms of the headquarters. So phenomenal program at that particular time, and exposure open your eyes. And so for me, my summer internship was a television commercial, and it was around the birth of a new nation. And so for me, I shot a video for my summer project that talked about a baby of, you take a 1 liter and you take a 20 ounce. They were introducing a 20 ounce package, single serve, right? 20 ounces today. But if you think about, you had no 20 ounces in the early 90s. People didn't consume that much Pepsi in one city.
And you had to make it cool, because branding, marketing, education.
Bingo. And I shot that commercial not knowing like that would be an aspiration for me getting into advertising. But I won because I don't know where I got an expensive video recorder. I shot my cousin. We had a set. Didn't know at that time I created a script. And we shot it on a VHS. I showed it, and we won. I won, my summer internship program that allowed me to come back for the next year. And so I didn't know the route. I didn't know what an agency was or creative or any of that stuff, right? I just knew, had an idea, creative, birth of a new nation, get a 20 ounce comes out of the freezer. That's the birth. 20-ounce package, introduced, and the rest is history with regards to how it's executed. But the reality is that, I came back to second summer, elevated me to shadow a district sales manager, got a final offer to be a district sales manager trainee at 22, 23, which meant that I managed, 14 route salesmen. And so then I moved to Augusta, Georgia to start there permanent, and, went from district sales manager trainee, district sales manager, territory development manager, where I manage pretty much Augusta and North Augusta. So you think that's a border between Georgia and South Carolina.
Yeah.
Home in the Masters. That's where I got exposed to golf. I didn't even know what the Masters was at that particular time until my great uncle started calling me. So yeah, but again, that was at the time the expansion of Walmart and mass in terms of food, drug, and mass. So critical time. Flash forward, stayed there 4 years. Lady by the name of Candy Walls from Pepsi, who had graduated from Harvard Business School, and she came, tapped me on the shoulder, just like, "How long are you gonna stay here?" I was like, "What are you talking about? I'm chilling. Like, I got my townhouse, got my fat car, company paid.
I already made it. This
Single,
is my mountaintop.
I'm chilling. Wildest dreams, right? And not, make decent. I got access to everything like within that market, right? And she challenged me. It's like, hey, you got the potential to exceed this. You should think about business school. And, similar to the Prop 48 situation, I was like, I'm good. Like, I don't want to have to go through that again. You got to take another standardized test, which at that time was a GMAT. Then she said, hey, you can go take, I wasn't exposed to any prep courses, right? So you can pay your money, and then you could figure out how to overcome those barriers. Did that. So I drove back and forth between Augusta and Atlanta on the weekends to prep for the GMAT, and then applied to business school after taking the GMAT. And again, same thing. Scores were horrible, but in my interviews, everything else was above standard, right?
Yeah.
Except for that test taking. And so someone mentioned Clark Atlanta University. Prior to University of Michigan, I think they had graduated the most MBAs. And you think about that particular time, it was 1996, right after the Olympics. And Atlanta was
buzzing. It was buzzing with different energy.
Hip hop, everybody's moving there.
We got something to say.
It was crazy, right? So long and short of that, I ended up at Clark Atlanta. Wanted and knew that I wanted to go into brand management, and so ended up, with 18 job offers for summer internship. That work ethic, and then got recruited. Ann Fudge, if you guys don't know who Ann Fudge is, she's the original OG. You need to definitely look her up. She was the first African-American president at Kraft General Foods. Every year she would come to Clark and select one or two candidates just to interview.
Say the name one more time.
Ann Fudge.
Ann Fudge. All right, we're putting it out there. We will have Ann on the show. Putting it out
there. Yeah. She is, definitely, if you can get her, when you think about the Executive Leadership Council, she is, she was the first African-American president of a general market agency, right?
Yeah.
Now, with Ann Fudge, got selected to internship with her. Me brainwashed, right? Thinking about the grandmother, godmother of brand marketing was P&G.
Yeah.
So my whole
Procter & Gamble for the listeners.
I'm going to Procter & Gamble. Why? But then Ann Fudge, she's like, what Kenneth Chenault is today, Ann Fudge still continues to be, right? They're peers. A little bit, but she's him and her when it comes to brand marketing and advertising. And so, passed on the opportunity. Probably one of the biggest mistakes of my career, if there is such a thing. But ended up
for a reason.
Happened for a reason. I'm at Procter and Gamble, and if you think about my origins, as you are climbing, you have to be careful in terms of what you ask for. For me, Procter and Gamble, talent wise, global wise, you have people that had the right educational track. Multi generations of parents have worked before, whereas I was the first to graduate from college from my family, right?
Yeah, bro.
For me, even though it was an aspiration because we want to be at the top, right? It wasn't the best fit for me. I started my brand career with folks that had multi-generational training and acumen and how to say things, what to say,
the buzzwords, the everything, the jargon, everything down pat.
And so you asked me about the aspiration, the seed of what got me interested in advertising, was being at Procter & Gamble. The agency came to present a pitch, and I saw everybody wearing all black. At that time, you had to carry, your boards in a little black briefcase. I was like, oh, that shit is cool. I want that. Like, I'm over here to suit, analyzing numbers, but these guys get to present boards and talk about pictures. Like, think about that. You present pictures and we fund you, meaning the brand, the budget, millions of dollars, because by then I understand, but because of my operations background, because of me understanding beverages more than most people at that table, that was my strength, right? And for me, Procter & Gamble was the training and the opening strategically. Was Pepsi was like my operations. I understand every class of trade, up and down the P&L in terms of the drivers of that P&L, because I had actually done that work. I knew how much stuff costs, cost of goods, that's COGS, operating expenses. I managed that. And so by the time I got to Procter & Gamble, they gave me the tools necessary to be a strategist and a business owner and a manager. And so, seeing those guys, that was, think Pepsi, commercial, was making shit up, right? Then I actually saw the people that actually did. It's like, oh, man, I can do that. But I got to fulfill the brand piece because, again, you're taught not to skip steps when you come from the mud, right?
Yeah.
And so because of that, I went on to continue in brand at Miller Brewing Company, somewhere closer to, you think of Miller, they deliver drinks versus through the warehouse. I got the opportunity to manage an agency or agencies. Foster's was my first brand coming out of business school.
Foster's.
It was a global brand, Australian for beer.
Australian for beer.
Yeah.
Australian for beer.
And the reality is, like, they were the innovators. 15-second, commercials because of costs. And then that's really when I started small to medium-sized agencies I was managing. And that's when I really started to understand, what it meant to be on an agency and the ethos of it as well. So that's how I started, and then went forward about another 8 years, and I went from brand at Miller, corporate strategy at Whirlpool, again, still managing the relationships with agencies. So I had a better feel for the inequities of the agencies, right? In terms of general market, multicultural, different categories. And then I went to...
We're gonna have to dive.
Yeah, no.
So there's a lot of terms that you might have said that people who where we from is from the mud, bro. So I just want to break it down, right? The P&L is the profit and loss statement. So when he says the P&L is basically the entire budget and how do we, what's coming in, what's going out, right? We're analyzing all that. What do we double down on? What do we get rid of? All of that stuff. So that's the P&L, right? So you talked about brand. You talked about a lot of different things that I want to really break down, bro, because a lot of people don't. We're so talented in this, but we don't know if it's an option.
Yeah.
most of us just stumble upon this industry when really we have all the tools to actually excel in this industry. You know what I'm saying? So that's the thing that gets me, bro. So like when we gonna talk about let's talk about general multicultural, because I said it off camera, I'll say it on camera, right? You was like you said you were responsible for the death of multicultural. I said
no.
It's just something like that. Clean that up. You said something like that.
You're gonna get me killed.
No, you said something like that. But that was
no. Look,
so you can say verbatim, but I was close.
No, you. It's let's take 2 steps back, right? And then we'll dive into it.
Let's walk them into it. Let's do it.
So when you when you become like a brand manager, and I was introduced to it through Candy, right? At Pepsi. Hey, different career, it's marketing, but within marketing, you have brands, and then you have people that manage those brands. And so when you are and typically the track you go into to manage a brand, to manage a P&L, you start with assistant, associate, and then brand, then director of marketing or brand, then VP, SVP, EVP, then chief marketing officer, right?
Yeah.
Usually that's like a 15 to 20 year trajectory to become a CMO, right?
Absolutely.
And so
message.
No.
So along the way, with me, the reason why Miller Brewing Company was a better option for me is because I understood the operations of beverages, right? Especially from an operations of direct store delivery. Trucks come in, they're at the store, guy gets out, gets the dolly, loads the packages, the cases, either from a truck or 18-wheeler in the back, and then they go in and they stock the shelves. Totally different business model. Let's say if you're at P&G, if you're at, when you go into the grocery store, Tropicana, with those guys, there's no direct store delivery. They deliver it through a warehouse that's centralized, and then they the manufacturer or the retailer then distributes those drinks.
A distributor. Yeah. Distributor.
Right? Yep. Totally different P&L structure, right? Between the two. And so with Miller Brewing Company, their structure operationally reflected what I come from at Pepsi. And so I went in and hit the ground running because I knew I should work, right? So now I get to focus on my gaps, learning the P&L, understanding what a brand plan is. How do you strategize? How do you fight for those line items? How do you work with distributors and trade? Like I get to elevate, right? And so one of the things that was, really interesting to me, especially when you think about imports at that time, Heineken, some of those other brands, they were like growing, 2-3x a category, right? People had moved away from Miller High Life, what we call full cal. They were doing Miller Lite and they were doing imports, and they were starting to dip into. This is right before the vodka era, name not to be said, right?
Yep.
And so the martinis, the golden era of hip hop, right? People still were drinking imports, and so I started managing agencies, and most of them were quote unquote general market agencies, right? Didn't really have any multicultural shops for imports, even though Heineken was. Who was drinking Heinekens, right? Us. But different product, different competitor. And so what it did get me exposure to is like F1 racing, because that wasn't here in the US at the time. Beaches, because with Foster's, it was a coastal brand. In Texas, obviously in Florida. But more importantly, is learning the P&L and structure. So then I went from assistant to associate, and then I managed Philip Morris had acquired Miller Brewing Company, and with them brought a ton of what we call below premium brands, right? These were the malt liquors.
Oh, no.
I mean, hold on. I didn't want to cut you off, Jeff, but you was like, who's drinking Heineken? We was drinking Coke 45, baby.
I was drinking Heinekens like
let's go. We go dive
in the hood, baby.
Right. So I own the P&L for OE 800, right?
What?
OE.
Yeah.
Crazy.
OE.
Green Hornet out west, malt liquor, right? So I had all the malt liquors below premium. Look how they put a tag on us, below premium, right?
That's crazy. That's
Think about
crazy.
that.
That's crazy.
Malt liquors, and then I had all of the full cal. So think Busch for Budweiser and Busch Light. So the college drinks, right? Even though you're supposed to be 21, legal drinking age consumers. So with that came the responsibility of what do we do with these malt liquors? They are a threat. They were part of an acquisition, high volume, low margin. And so that's when I got exposed to multicultural advertising through Don Coleman, which later became Global Hue.
Yeah.
So Don Coleman and his team were the ones to train me on multicultural marketing. And, they were part of my agency as well as the general market shops that, everybody's familiar with. And that's how I got introduced to the inequities in terms of spend.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the work that we do, and I'll speed it up. You guys tell me what pace. A lot of work that we do is about operationalizing change.
Okay.
Of the budget, right? And so at that particular time, I saw, wow, we pay these general market agencies this, and we pay Don Coleman and all these other guys this, but we want them to perform the same way in terms of impact.
And sometimes even better. And most
absolutely, they don't give you, usually at that particular time, they don't give you the right budget, right? But at that particular time, you didn't really have what we call the growth of the new majority, right? You're still talking about the late 90s.
Yeah.
What was happening was the growth of the Hispanics, right? So I was at Miller Brand Company when we used to have to get into rooms and annual planning. And this is what people really have to understand in terms of the value chain. By the time agencies get assigned dollars, decisions have already been made in terms of level of investment, right? In the annual planning cycle. And so what I know very, very, very well, and this gets back to what we were talking about before, when you start in the mud and come up, you fundamentally learn every seat within the decisions as to how dollars are spent. So I had training by some of the best brands is how to develop brand plans, how to write them, how to fight for those dollars and investments, and then how do you deploy those assets from a media standpoint, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, at that time, you're still trying to come up. Maybe your voice is not as loud as my voice became to lead an industry as to how do you operationalize inclusive change and growth, not only from a population standpoint, but from an economic and financial standpoint. And that's what I took away from those roles. Is like, oh man, meaning we're actually intentionally planning budgets every year where we're only going to give these multicultural shops less than 3%. And the growth is happening in these audiences. And then you got to tell me to pick one, Hispanic or African American. So those are the conversations we were in annually.
Wow.
And those are the conversations that helped me prepare for what I chose to do today. So it's not only just the advertising piece, which is important, but I've been on both sides of the table. I wrote the checks and I asked for checks.
There
right?
you go.
Message.
And so
You're dangerous. That's when you're dangerous.
Incredible, right? And so that's what I learned at Miller Brand Company, and like I went from assistant associate, and then at Whirlpool, I was brand manager of Whirlpool Dish, and then got into corporate strategy in terms of the brand architecture for Whirlpool brand, Whirlpool Kenmore estate, and Whirlpool in terms of the mix from an overall brand architecture standpoint. And then I left there, which that was in Michigan. I went from Milwaukee. I went from Atlanta, Cincinnati, back to Atlanta, went to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, from Milwaukee to St. Joe, Michigan. And then from St. Joe, Michigan, I got the opportunity of a lifetime, and that is Dell. And at Dell, to bring all this together was leading spend and investments from a digital standpoint, and attribution, meaning because of my corporate strategy background, because of my brand background, I was brought in to help them frame up an annual planning cycle. But the team that I manage, and that's $500 million of assets, right? That I plan with my team, and I want people to really understand this. Like, you're talking about, constantly swimming, in the deep end. When I went to Dell, 98% of their marketing decisions from an acquisition standpoint happen through, today we know it as a platform, but back then it was called a configurator. So 98% of their purchases happen at Dell.com. And so what that meant is that you had the ability to track your decisions, attributions, right? So from the time you plan your spend, you're able to track it all the way through to checkout. So the group that I manage is what they call econometric modeling team, right? Now, I'm from Poe, South Carolina, right? Barely could score anything on the SAT, but Dell.com gave me the responsibility of managing calls and clicks. Right?
Yeah.
Well, you go crazy, yo. You go crazy.
No. I want to just talk about, we talked about, I think 2 shows ago, about your growth and your journey within your career and knowing when to pivot. Like, you can be in a good spot, have a good salary, feel like you have a good support system that is going to help you grow within the company, but also realizing, even with all of those things in your favor, there might be a time to pivot and make a different move. So you mentioned now transferring to 2-3 different companies.
Yeah.
You're elevating, but were there not the same opportunities within those companies? And now that you have worked for them, and I don't know how many years you dedicated to each one, we want to get the audience to understand, like, what was your decision to how much time you were investing in each company, and what made you decide that, okay, I've invested this, I did this, but let me move to a different company for a different opportunity.
Yeah. So I'm going to, share something that I never shared before, right?
Okay.
Everybody tells you, the linear career path, right? I'll break them down to you. Left Pepsi. Someone told me aim higher. Candy walls, right? I was in year 3. By year 4, you study and look when people go back to business schools, usually 3 to 5 years. Great time. General manager at that time, didn't really understand the process for getting your MBAs. Because you see how people, hey, you don't need an MBA to necessarily continue to climb the corporate ladder. But, I literally got back my reference from him. And he wanted me to stay in Augusta to continue to work. And he trashed me on my references. Literally walked in the next week, quit, not knowing if I had gotten accepted. Damn! He wanted to muffle me, right? And people do that in your career. And so I want people to hear all the parts, right?
Yeah.
Let's go to Miller Brewing Company. With P&G, I knew you also have to recognize when the water's too deep, right? For me to compete, oh man, I was already, staying up at night trying to learn what these buzzwords and jargons were, but also I had to learn, brand marketing.
Absolutely.
Before getting there, not on the job, but before getting there. So I constantly felt like I wasn't good enough, right? I wasn't moving fast enough. So I went back, determined to find the industry that I can compete in an equal footing because of my operations background. Still stayed in brand, but a different type of brand, right?
Yeah.
Miller Brewing Company, real talk. I didn't feel like that they were promoting me fast enough. Right?
Yeah.
I was like, hey, why is this person getting the brand before me? Well, Jeff, you need to do this, this, and this. And
a little more polished here, a little bit of this here, a little of that.
Look, I was working for the brand. I had the numbers. Like, I was crushing it, right?
That's how it happens, yeah.
But she played a better job. She, knew she had, again, what do they teach you sometimes in the African-American community? Don't tell them your business. If they ask you what you did over the weekend, just say you had a great, me and the family did X, Y, and Z. But sometimes you got to invite them in, right? Share just enough to where they feel like that they get to know you personally, right?
Yeah.
No one taught me that. I was always saying, hey, don't let them know where you stay or what you did on the weekend. Don't drive that car up to the parking lot because they'll think you're doing better than them, right? But the reality is that you got to humanize those relationships. And she did a better job of humanizing those relationships.
That's the real.
They had been to her house, had dinners, right?
Know her family.
Been to the sporting event.
Yep.
Right? So I moved because, hey, it was time. I'm not going to get the brand manager. And again, when you're on that brand CMO track, it's a time thing. You think. And so I left because I got a bigger offer, Whirlpool, different challenge. Whirlpool had a Black president at that particular time. He recruited me at the National Black MBA Conference and a bunch of us to come in and change the trajectory of senior leadership. It was a promise of getting you into that director VP role, right? So when you climb in the corporate ladder, your first role as an officer is usually a vice president. The quicker you get to a vice president, the quicker you can speed up becoming a CMO, right? Absolutely. But in order to get to CMO, you got to become a VP somewhere. And so that was the promise there. And then went to Dell, not because of my wanting, because, my wife at the time got an opportunity in Austin, Texas with Dell. So I was a trailing spouse who had made the career moves, but it was a balance, right? Now we got to move because of her career needs and so forth. And so that's how I made my moves. They're all going to be different, right? But you got to keep that ticking. You got to keep that timing. And when you look around the building and the energy that you feel when you walk in, how people tense up when the annual review comes, how people get promoted and you're like, whoa, wait a minute, what do I got to do? And then you develop a personal development plan and then all of a sudden it doesn't happen. Now it's time to look, not at the first sign of defeat. It's almost like I equate it like if you're QB1, all of a sudden in spring ball, you don't retain that position. Doesn't mean you transfer or leave. You get in there and you fight for it, right? And that's what you're doing when you don't get that call and you're not elevating. And so sometimes they're personal as a whole. But the Dell move, I think, set me up for life. And that was not planned, right? And mainly because it gave me to the introduction of digital, algorithmic models, decision science, math marketing is what I call it, effectiveness, before the industry had even begun to think about it. And so that's what Dell did for me as a whole.
Damn, bro. I'm like, I could geek over this shit because this is my shit.
We haven't even got to advertising, right?
Yeah, bro. Like, it's a lot of messages. Yeah. I just want people to understand. Like, I get it because I'm in the industry. You said a lot of gems just now, bro. Like you said, one, the playing the game, right? Let's just talk about playing the game. We talk about this a lot with a lot of Black executives, right? We had the first Black executive, shout out to Perry, the first Black CCO on Madison Ave. We've got Walter Gear. We have so many people, bro. But we're all playing the game, but sometimes we're not giving the game. So we're playing a different game within the game. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like it's a different trajectory. Like, and what you're doing too, like you're building a brand that's talking to the culture. And you're like, whoa, why are we not getting general market budgets when what we're doing is actually making the general market look better because there's no attribution to tie into what we're doing to that. Right. We talk about commercials and all that other stuff, right? So we have to give you my model and attribution. I think it's all fluff.
Yeah.
Attribution is fluff. It's a good North Star, but it doesn't tell you the full picture, and nobody will ever get a holistic picture because we have impact over metrics, right? Somebody come here right now is watching our show, goes into advertising, right? Just because of what you're saying right now, what are we going to be able to track that person put in the application for Ogilvy Mather, heard more than the title, heard Jeff talking, said, I want to get into this, right? And what is the value of that? We'll never get to those numbers.
Right.
As a brand, whether you're consumer, whether you're B2B, B2C, doesn't matter. So attribution is all kind of fluff. So we always have the impact over metrics. If you make the impact, it's going to eventually tie back to the metric.
Yeah. Yeah. No, look.
That was a bar. Shit. Woo!
No, that was a bar for sure.
Message. Hold on.
You know, it's interesting that, and we could like have a whole nother 30-minute conversation, but I'll tie it back.
For sure.
You know, the thing I think that, you know, Dell definitely taught me was that when you look at, you know, traditional brand metrics at that time, you know, the quantitative piece primarily came from third parties, right? You did your annual review, you did your quarterly refresh, and then you did your mid-year refresh, and you know, second and third revised forecast, right? That's just like a cycle from an operation standpoint. The difference I'll say with Dell, and you know, 98% of their sales came through Dell.com, is that they didn't need that at that particular time.
Okay.
Is you literally, for every dollar that you plan and invested from an attribution standpoint, 98% of that spend you could track all the way to checkout, right? Unheard of at that particular time. Now you have
now it's all
the
over.
Amazons of the world, but even today, most retailers, attribution wise, are still stuck between 50 to 60% at best.
Because some are still
the transaction,
last click, all that stuff is
well, the still today, most people buy stuff offline, right?
Yeah.
In retail. Even though people, you know, so the attribution models are very flawed when it comes to like traditional retail. Dell was not flawed.
Just give the audience a quick context, right? When we talk about, when I just said first click, last click, right? So if I'm doing it, let's just say I'm doing the advertisement for Final Destination or Sinners, right? I put out Sinners, boom, boom. I'm like, yeah, I just went to saw the movie, you should go see it, right? You went and go and see the movie, but you also saw a promotion on Facebook ads that had the Sinner trailer, right? You didn't click on it, but you saw my post and went there. There's no way to track what influenced you to make that.
And you bought it at the box office, right?
And you bought it at the box office, right? So the attribution at that point could go either way. So that's why we say impact over metrics. Because if my say and me saying it was a dope ass movie made you go out and go do that and go buy that ticket, what is the value to me versus that ad?
Right. Can't track it. And so, you know, when, you know, you're thinking, you know 2004 and 5, right?
It was super new.
And you just gave me the keys to something I didn't even know. You're asking me to work with, so for folks that don't know what a econometric modeler basically is, you know, from the highest order of building algorithms. They are able to look at your historicals, understand the weight of those decisions, and then be able to model those behaviors to get you to buy and convert. Right? So I had 2 guys on my team. I had a lady that managed the budget in terms of those investments. And then I had someone who managed or interface like with the creative team and then with the media team. Right? So we would plan the spend, they would make the stuff, brief the agencies, and my role, because I had strategy and planning of those assets, was to track the effectiveness of those spends across those channels.
Yeah.
Right? And so when you look at the trajectory, like sales, Pepsi, trade, brand strategy, corporate strategy, and then at Dell, it was like, oh my God. But every night I was up to 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning trying to teach myself about math marketing, is what I call it, right? And so that's how I got into understanding marketing effectiveness at Dell. And then after 2 years, the people that were working with me at Whirlpool, he became a CMO at Sears. Eddie Lampert, private equity, acquires Sears and Kmart, wants to do a turnaround, but wants to be more like what we call today Amazon than traditional Sears. So it gave me the opportunity to go from all these mature companies' growth trajectory to turnaround. Second best experience that I got, because now you're working with a business in a very different maturation category, right?
Yeah.
So you get to test shit that you may have been risk averse, because now you're just trying to get the brand out of the mud, right? And have a future. So very different thinking in terms of approach to brand, strategy, planning of assets. Whereas before I had to ask for permission because of the historicals associated with growth and the trajectory of growth to Wall Street. Here it's like, you got any ideas? What did you learn at these companies that you could bring to us? And so I ran the soft lines marketing for Sears. So I had marketing and brand planning for ready to wear, men's, kids. It was 7 different categories from a retail perspective. And so the whole idea was to make them digital, right? To go from traditional to digital. And so I said all that to say, after about a couple of years, amazing opportunity. People ask me about, Sears all the time. Great. That's why I learned to work with McKinsey, some of the other companies, to do transformation, change management,
Consultant.
and so, yeah, that's where we like to say with Reframe, and we'll flash forward. I was coming back from Sears. I had a family in Austin, Texas. We built the big old Texas home. No way my wife at the time our family was looking to go back to the Midwest. And so I was flying back and forth from Austin to Chicago as I was trying to get back to Austin, Texas. And you think about Austin, Texas, that was like the center of tech, South by Southwest. A group of us started Blacks in Tech. So that's how I began to make my entry into the tech realm, because I was, Austin at that time was about 10% people of color, Black specifically was about 6 to 7%. And so, that's how we created the community and began to diversify the tech space at South by Southwest, because I was on the ground there. And so how I got to Ogilvy.
You're a beast, bro. As for, I hope y'all catching up. Like, it's a lot of gems. If you exactly know what he's saying some shit.
A group of us started what's known today as, Blacks in Tech.
I've heard of that.
But at South by Southwest. And, that allowed me, meaning commuting. I found a recruiter, Carol Watson. Again, people, relationships. Carol Watson at the time was trying to recruit for more Blacks to come into advertising, not at entry level, but mid level. Ogilvy was on a trajectory in terms of, experimenting in terms of how to bring people at a mid level career and how to elevate them. And at the time, Ogilvy was launching a consulting practice. Because again, I used to manage agencies. There's no way in hell I was signing up to go and work for,
one of the biggest ones. Yeah.
I was not about to take on an account management role. And I was like, where would I go? You got people that have been doing strategy from a creative strategy. And the reality is that the agency business and the business model was being disrupted. And so they needed someone who understood the client side. And they needed someone who understood digital transformation. And so, when you look at that era time period, going from old to new from a media and tech perspective, I'd rode that wave in many levels inside a company. Now it was an opportunity and challenge to learn it from an agency perspective. And so, was hired at Ogilvy, moved a family from Austin to New York, and was in Ogilvy Consulting And at Ogilvy Consulting, we were like McKinsey, meaning we help plan marketing, advertising, creative to be more effective from an outcome perspective. And so brands literally understood the marketing return on investment, or ROMI is what some people call it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's how I got into advertising, right? Wasn't a direct path. It wasn't through being, creative, but it was on the business side, actually.
You went from there,
Yeah,
up.
yeah.
What?
I'm curious, Jeff, really quickly. We always talk about like just being your most creative self. And we have a lot of guests that come on here, and we always emphasize the fact of like, don't be afraid to make a mistake. So when you said like you were in a position where they're like, yo, whatever idea you got, like bring it, like, we love that kind of opportunity because that's where we kind of shine, right? What was your craziest like idea that you presented to them in that moment? Like, one of your most craziest ideas, like, yo, I think this could work. And you presented it like, yo, anybody else wouldn't go for this, but I know you guys would love this type of idea. What was that like?
Yeah.
Like crazy
So
idea?
my idea at the time was probably the craziest, which, rather than, it doesn't seem crazy now, rather than invest in real estate, why don't you deliver direct to the home, right? Sounds crazy, at that particular time in the early 2000s, but Amazon was still a business that was selling books.
Books, yeah.
Right? With Sears, they were a mass merchandiser. So they had the inventory, they had the volume, and they had the scale. What they didn't have was the operations. I understood operations because I would have did at Pepsi.
Yeah.
From a distribution standpoint. I knew the next phase of impact was going to be, framing up the delivery mechanism to go directly to the home, just like the milk crates, right? And so when we presented that idea, there was a small team, innovation team that we put together to pursue it, but the economics are not there. So then you're trapped, right? So oftentimes, you come up with these crazy ideas, you want it to be crazy, but most brands aren't gonna take the perceived risk, right?
That's the
Yeah. That's the perceived
you
risk.
could have been Amazon if you listened.
Yeah, no, real talk. Because very similar. If you look at most e-commerce companies, now you have intermediaries that do the fulfillment for you. Dell, incredible operations company in terms of how to deliver computers direct to the home.
Yeah.
Amazon, incredible operations. They did it so well that they created their own fulfillment mechanism after raping FedEx and UPS to teach them how to do it, right?
Talk about it.
They brought their own trucks. Everything that they learned through a contractor, they basically replicated and did it for themselves.
And got third parties that if you got a truck, you can go
a car. If you got a car, right?
Anything.
So that's that's imagination, that's risk. Having a capital be able to take those risks. Most of us don't, right?
Yeah.
How many years was Amazon unprofitable before they became profitable? Because he sold the idea of what it means to have $1 trillion company. So yeah, that was probably the craziest as a whole.
That's it. The fact that you even thought that far to say, look, convenience, right? Like nobody wants to go to. How do we improve the customer experience, right?
Yeah, before it was a thing.
Yeah, like how do we go to our website, purchase the shirt, have the shirt come through? But I think that Amazon did really well, even though it was a lot of people in that market. COVID made them it.
Yeah.
COVID made them it's kind of like Google, right? Google became a verb, right? Like you want to do something, Google it. Search is going to change completely. It's not going to be a Google 5-6 years from now. It's going to be AI, some iteration of that, whether Gemini, whatever it is, right? But the fact that they saw it and the fact that they were in position to execute and bring it direct to home when a global pandemic happened. You know how much money they made? Oh my goodness. Now, if Sears or any other company, think about Kmart, anybody, I don't care who you are.
Yeah. No, so we went back and looked at the 10K report. And for people who are not familiar with the 10K, these are filings that companies have if they're public they have to produce.
Yeah.
And so we worked with the consultants, looked at the 10K, and you could tell if you come from a distributor background where things were heading. So Bechtel, Webvan, Peapod, Home Grocer were some of the others at the turn of the 2000s that I think Bechtel, and then the infrastructure, right? Rapistan. If you haven't heard of Rapistan, Atlanta-based company, we went down, flew down, and spoke with them. When we think about scanning products, that gives you the inventory count from an electronic basis. So they made that hardware, right? So all that, right? And so if you look at these companies' 10K reports, they're gonna give you the seeds, right? The signals in terms of where they're going. And so that's how I got to advertising. And flash forward, I know we spent a lot of time on the career piece.
We got to talk about the business, man. But
wait, before we jump into it, we got some comments. We got, we getting a lot of comments, Jeff. I want to read off one comment from Instagram. It says, as far as Black tech goes, right? What are your thoughts about the giant AI center in the works in Abilene, Texas? What opportunities for Blacks in tech with this international government-backed AI project? Like, what are your thoughts on that? How do you see that panning out for the Black and brown community?
Good question, whoever that was. Good question.
Yeah, no, look, I have a strong point of view when it comes to infrastructure, right? And the reason I deem the term infrastructure or the utility of the innovation, and everything is a continuum. And so what do I mean by that? When the internet was commercialized, it was a military product, right? Government had invested in it. Folks out of University of Illinois finds a way to develop a search mechanism, and all of a sudden you have this mass migration west. Now, part of the reason I got so many job offers that summer is because, all of the, I call it Ivy talent, got wind of what was coming. And so rather than take the traditional brand job, high security, very trackable in terms of where you go, they went out and pursued the risk opportunity, right? And then you created Silicon Valley. Continuum. Move from the infrastructure of the internet to, the scale of the internet, right? AOL came, created this fictitious intermediary that you have to go through them to get to the internet. Beautiful, right? It had sound, but people fell for it and they went through it versus in www. Infrastructure, right? Intermediary, created a channel, had some content, gave you everything packaged and aggregated and fed it back to you for a monthly subscription, right? Created the freemium and then social media, right? Again, the utility of that innovation and how oftentimes Blacks are not allowed to participate in the creation of the utility.
There it goes.
Because of the capital piece, right? And flash forward, the same thing with artificial intelligence.
Come on.
Continuum. When you hear me talk about econometric modeling, if you haven't heard of it, look it up, Google it. Algorithmic models, look it up, Google it. If you don't know, the only way to create a algorithm that has a high proficiency of outcomes that are predictive is that you got to start from a framework. You have to experiment. You start with a hypothesis, a thesis, you experiment, you test and learn. Then all of a sudden, you've got an outcome, predictive outcome that's consistent with what you would have done using that framework, right? And so when you think about artificial intelligence, and we face this with Reframe AI, the barriers of entry are so high to create your own custom algorithm model to test and learn and then train that model. It's almost impossible for us to participate in the making of the utility for the masses, right? So then we become creators, not infrastructure builders, right? And that's my message.
Yeah, they were saying that it's a $500 billion project they're talking about. I don't know the actual number, but they're saying it's a $500 billion project. So again,
that's the open AI joint.
So when we're talking about, again, just being at the right place at the right time is not always enough, right? You have to have the resources to be able to capitalize on whatever you see coming. A lot of the things that you talked about, if you were somebody in position, like you were in position, so you could see the movement, you could see the technology that's coming out, you could see the integration of said technology, and then you could say, okay, this is where the industry is going. Now you remove yourself from that, from the basic consumer standpoint. The average person can't see that. They don't understand that, right? Because they don't know all of that background information. What they're seeing is what's accepted at the time. So they don't see the beta testing. They don't, they don't see the training. They don't see none of that. They have to see it when it works. The gap between the development stage, right, and the when it works stage, that right there is generationally different when it comes to wealth building and sustainment.
Generational, absolutely.
It's crazy.
You hit it, Cuzzo. But guess what? You know what? We should be asking the basic question that we should be asking all the time when we see all this shit is the why.
Right.
Yeah. Well,
is the why.
I think definitely is the why. And I'll give you guys another tangible example.
Yes.
And this will bring it full circle, and hopefully for the listener, a lot of times, so I left Ogilvy to start Reframe Consulting Services, right? And it was based on this idea of helping companies accelerate inclusive change and growth, right? And so what a lot of people don't know about, and I'm glad you guys gave me the opportunity and time to talk about my background, is because
honored, bro. Come on.
A lot of people think that are in the biz, right? And it's a small cottage industry. This is, we're very blessed to have had the opportunity, right, to be able to talk about this. But at the same time, we're laying the next generation roadmap. You think about us, civil rights, we're 2 to 3 generations removed from the 1960s era, right? Now it's going to move much faster for our kids, right? They're not going to have 60 years to use a blueprint that was written 60 years ago and still be relevant to today. Just not going to happen. And so when you think about, the new business model is the algorithm. That's the new business model. And so if your business is not a automated predictive outcome, as a participant in building the technology versus being a participant of using the technology, that's the gap, right? That's the gap. And so I say that to say with Reframe, and people ask me all the time, look, we've been doing this now 10 years, 8 out of the 10, partly because of my inability to financially take risk because of where I came from, right? Financially.
Yeah. And just thought process too, all that. You might have
my scientific training, right? My scientific training. So, I break it down to years 1 through 4. When you look, and I'll get on my soapbox about us and our communities, a lot of our business models are based on the 1960s. Think about that. Now, I made it my point to innovate, to give us a different playbook that was quantitatively based, right? And so, when we introduced the idea of total market within the industry, while I was at Ogilvy, a lot of resistance. But let's walk back 2 steps in terms of my career. Lived in Austin, Texas. Before the whole startup movement happening, let's say Austin was a B market, Silicon Valley was an A market when you talk about real estate, right? A lot of people were going back and forth between Silicon Valley and Austin, Texas. I was having these meetings because people wanted to get into Dell, and I started meeting with these founders. Now think about me. I'm from South Carolina, bro. I'm on the corporate track. These cats are like pitching TAM, total addressable market.
TAM.
Right? And so what does that mean? That means that of the available population of buyers, that's the market opportunity. It's like, wow, I never really heard that. In marketing, because we're so glean in terms of the target, Nielsen, RI, in terms of what it comes back to, we don't really think about the addressable market, right? Because not many companies at that time were digital.
There it goes.
And that gets to the addressability piece that you and I didn't want to take it down that rabbit hole in terms of attribution.
No, I'm with you.
Before you get to attribution, you got to understand the TAM, total addressable market. So then you can make those decisions in terms of who
are we
build awareness, consideration, conversion.
There it goes.
So the idea of introducing this TAM to marketing was total market approach. What is a total addressable opportunity? Because what I knew at that particular time, companies were not including Blacks, Hispanics, and Asians in the financial analysis, right? Because most brands did not grow up with people of color centered as a financial outcome. It was incremental. It wasn't the market. And so I say that, total market is a third option for how you buy goods and services. But what? Total addressable market.
Total addressable market. Always heard it. I never tied it into attribution. I always, but it makes sense.
Well,
how do you know
downstream?
You not know your market. It makes sense.
Well, at that particular time, the market was what Nielsen RI said,
and whoever said the numbers are right, and those numbers are flawed.
If you look at before the innovation of digital, most brands grew up base consumers, and you hear the word base all the time, when they were starting their brands in the 50s and 60s, right? And so if you think about beauty, why it took them so long is because incrementally, most brands who are public, they're trying to plan for that 3 to 5% increase, right? So can I get them to buy more of my existing base, or can I get incremental people that have no relationship with this to come into consideration set? If you're a betting person, you're going to choose that buy more every time to keep your job, right?
Price on Sundays, yep.
And so I say that to say years 1 through 4 was validating the inclusive customer experience design. Years, 4 through 8 is validating the inclusive employee experience design, right? And so what we knew was that when you talk about increasing growth for the marketplace, you have you had 2 options, either a general market approach or a multicultural approach, right? Now, if I'm a vendor and I'm coming in to get the most amount of money of value for decades, the only option that I could provide as a service provider was either become a general market or a multicultural vendor.
That's it. Yeah.
I said, what the hell? Let's do a third option. Like, I want the whole fucking budget.
Come on.
I want the total market.
That's a bull market.
Right? So, given my background, why would you limit me?
Limit yourself.
Higher, which I know the procurement process because I've bought those goods and services, right? And so, it took years. Now we've had over 50 customer engagements because I got it from both sides, the people that are general and the multicultural, right? So it gets back to the comment you made in which I did say, some people call me the anti-multicultural or the multicultural killer. What they leave out is that I want to be the general market killer too, because I want the whole
double go crazy
right now.
Yes.
And that's what I mean. Like a lot of our institutions are still using a blueprint, and there's nothing wrong with that, because in the validation of those, and this gets to Chad, what you were saying, had I chose one path or the other, we have a lot more money in the bank, right? Because it's hard to get people to buy differently when they're not incentivized to buy differently, right? And so when we go in there talking about the total market approach for the marketplace to inclusive customer experience design, we got resistance because that's not the way brands typically buy, right? And that gets to the point you made in terms of between the experimenting, the testing and learning versus the actual consumption.
Correct.
It's tough, right? Now, here's the end result, right? We went through the last 8 years of testing, learning, validating the approach. Again, the way I ask us to think about it, right? If I would say to you, hey, I'm only going to give you the option of using that phone on the wall, or we make our own iPhone, right, to serve the global market of the total addressable market, you're going to choose this every day.
Absolutely.
So why are you forcing me to go and use the phone on the wall in terms of designing and building a business model, right?
Yeah, that is my career.
Right now,
we preach it. Yo, can I just say just one thing? We preach this, right? Why I love this interview and why you see me over here like giddy and excited, right? Because you're saying the same things that I've actually experienced, right? I'm gonna keep it real with you. So I've been in sales for 14 years, right? You know when things changed for me 10 years into the thing, when I saw every process of the sales. I did the Sandler, I did this method, I did every methodology you could think of. And you know what I just came to is like, yo, why am I making 100 calls to get one relationship when I can actually have maybe 50 people or 100 people come to me and ask for the relationship? How do I turn it on its head? And that's what I did with sales, right? So I end up looking at like, look, I hate the feeling of me coming home, making 100 dials. What if I don't get nothing that day? I feel like shit. I feel like I didn't get my value, right? What does that do to my mental health? What does that do to how I treat my family, right? My girl want to say something to me. Hey, babe, how was your day? It was fucking sucked. Everything, right? Everything. So I'm like, how can I flip it on its head, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create my own thing, right? I'm gonna go on LinkedIn. I had 200 followers, bro. The listeners know the story. And I basically said, you know what? I'm just gonna be me. I'm gonna put the hat and hoodie on. But guess what? You know what I did is the marketing math that you mentioned. I looked at the algorithm and said, guess what? There's 720 million people on this platform, but only 2% of people are posting per day. Out of this, right? How many people are going to be with a hat and a hoodie, sitting on the couch in the Bronx that know marketing and sales the way that I do and have the same exact experience? It's going to be 0.000.1.
Yeah. No, it's math.
It really is. The math of it. So when you see me giddy about this shit, it's like, but the fact that you asked, the fact that you was like, look, there's 2 options here, but why the hell there's not an option 3? And that's what I want our listeners to understand, right? There is always an option 3 or option 4, but you have to challenge the status quo. Some people are going to challenge the status quo and some people aren't. But if you do, look at what you've been able to accomplish and look what other things. This is how we push everything forward.
Right. No, look, I want to make sure that we also address the question of the user, of the audience, is that, with artificial intelligence, in order to, so we had the framework for how do you, and again, most people when we started Reframe thought that we were a creative agency in terms of, the scale play, right? Because you can do this work and you have to fit in the box in terms of category. We were very clear when we talk about the McKinsey of culture, the way that we define culture, and I know it's used a lot. It's based on social science. Okay?
There we go.
And it is a science, behavior science, and so and underneath social is the behavior piece, and then we get to the neuro, which is where we're headed next, right? When you talk about artificial intelligence. So, one of the things at Ogilvy that we were very clear about at Ogilvy culture is that we would be culturally based. Not for the culture, though, like you may think, but culture from a social science perspective, because as you guys know, when you're asking companies to move millions, hundreds of millions of dollars, it's more tied to science. It kind of gets back. I think we got to cover another podcast coming.
We have to.
Around,
we absolutely
around
have
attribution
to.
and
No,
you got to do both. You got to do both.
Oh man,
you got to do both.
You see, Jeff,
excited, bro. Jeff, you're a beast. I just want to say
this is why we this is why we said to you what we said to you in the green room about how these podcasts can go. Because once you warm up and you start going,
we just start going. And next thing you know, we got a 3-hour pod with 1,000 people on this.
Yeah, we've been getting, I know we coming up on time. We've been getting, ladies and gentlemen that's been commenting, we've been getting a lot of comments. He's just been dropping so many gems. We didn't want to interrupt him. But Jeff, please, before we get out of here, number one, please let the people know, because a lot of people are commenting. Clearly, you sparked a lot of interest. Please let the people know that want to, follow you, get in contact with you, and learn more about your organization. Where's the easiest way to do that?
Yeah, the easiest way is to, on all the social channels is at Jeffrey L. Bowman, JeffreyLBowman. Company is getreframe.com for our consulting services. And then for our AI product is getreframe.ai. Two separate businesses, one in consulting and one on the AI side. So yeah, that's the best way to get in contact with us.
And ladies and gentlemen, again, we always say this, but we're not going to stop saying it because it's super important, right? Listen, Jeff is a businessman, and obviously, if you reach out to him and things of that nature on LinkedIn or any of these platforms, right, he will try his best to get back to you. Please allow him the time to get to each message, right? He's doing a lot of business during the day. You don't know how many messages he's receiving. You don't know what his day looks like. So again, just be patient and allow him the time to respond accordingly. Be respectful, right? Be respectful and things of that nature. And I'm pretty sure any opportunities that you're looking for, any information, he will be glad to disseminate that to you. That's number one. Number two, Jeff, I want to just say, on behalf of the More Than the Title family, welcome to the family, right? Welcome to the family.
Yes, sir. Hopefully we get a lot of it.
Yeah, we appreciate you coming on the show. So let me tell you what that means, right? Like Cuzzo said, this is impact over metrics, right? We don't gatekeep, right? We don't gatekeep. So we've had over 200 guests at this point. And now that you are a part of the family, what that means is you have access to any previous guests that we've had on the show and future guests that come on to the show. So even if you're not in the same space or, same area of expertise as a guest, you just want to connect with somebody because you like what they're talking about, you want to meet them, you let us know. We'll check their schedule. We'll check your schedule. We normally do it as getting on a Zoom call. We'll introduce you guys, and then we jump off. And then whatever relationship you build after that is up to you, right? We don't ask for anything in return. There's no payola to that. That's how we pay it forward, right? So that, and also, if you're ever doing an event in New York or something like that, we always come out and we support our guests. So if you're ever doing an event or anything like that and you want us to come out and support, or if you just want to grab a beer or something like that, just link up, we're always just a phone call away, right? So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, Cuzzo said phenomenal. He said phenomenal at the beginning of the show.
Yeah.
We haven't steered you right. We haven't steered you wrong, right? So this brother came on, and again, he told you his journey. But I want to just highlight a couple key factors within his journey that I want you guys to pay attention to, right? He wasn't afraid to know what he wanted and go after it at a very young age, right? He told you that, listen, I'm not a great test taker. So that's a weakness for me. But my strength is I'm a hard worker. I'm motivated, right? I'm not afraid to try out different things. And he continued to grind, which which at that point clearly superseded him not having great test scores because he has the work ethic and now the experience to back whatever move or position he was now applying for. He also decided to say, listen, this is what I want in my life and for my family. So I'm going to get up and get out of my comfort zone, and move from state to state, following his jobs and his opportunities. But then he also said, guess what? Now I have a family. And although I did this for myself as a single person at times, now I'm going to do this for my wife in support of her. And we always talk about the value of a support system and what that means, right? Success is not linear. Nobody is successful on their own, right? So it takes a village to prepare us to get there. And it also takes us a village to maintain the status there. The man had 4 jobs. The man had 5 jobs. He drove a bus. He pole voted. He delivered the paper. You understand what I'm saying? He probably sold Jamaican t-shirts with the holes in it. I'm just telling you what he wrote on the back of a Pepsi truck while throwing newspapers at people's houses. The man is multi-talented. You know what it is, which reiterates what we say at the end of every single show. The dream is free.
But the hustle is sold separately, y'all. Shout out to our brother Jeff Bowman.
We appreciate
Thank you both.
Listen, part 2 coming soon. Yeah. And we told y'all get y'all tape decks ready. Who but us more than the title? Yeah. We gonna see y'all on Thursday.
Let's do it.
What you know about me? Seen it all, heard it all. Oh, what you know about me?